So is the Ableton Push 1 still worth it in 2025? As someone who spends a lot of time teaching with Ableton Live and the Push, I've noticed something interesting. Students get super excited about using the Push 3 until they see the price. Then they check out. They go, hell no. And honestly, I get it. It's not cheap. And that got me thinking, what about the Push 1? It's a fraction of the price and it can go for as low as £50 on the second-hand market. Could this be the perfect budget-friendly Ableton controller for beginners and students alike? Or is it just outdated tech? Does it even work with Ableton Live 12.1 and above? And how much of its functionality actually still holds up today? Let's jump in and find out. The Push 1 was first created way back in 2013, and it was a collaboration between Akai and Ableton. This collaboration was Akai's step into the controller market, was designed to be a hands-on tool for Ableton Live. At the time, the Push 1 was revolutionary. It turned the DAW into an instrument, a live performance tool, and ultimately got producers away from constantly staring at a computer screen. It had this unique design of a grid of 64 pads, rotary controls, and then a user interface that completely integrated automatically with Ableton Live. How? It used something called a MIDI script, which essentially means every pad, button, dial automatically mapped up to things in Ableton Live. There was no need for any tedious MIDI mapping or manual setup. You just plugged it in and boom, it works straight away right out the box. As we all know, technology moves fast. Since the release of Push 1, we've had the 2 and the 3, which have significantly raised the bar. So how do the main features stack up? The first big question is, does the Push 1 still connect to Ableton Live 12.1? The answer is yeah, just fine. You can see here, I have my Push 1 all plugged in, ready to control Ableton Live 12.1. When I first got the Push 1, have to admit, it was a late night, spontaneous eBay purchase. And if I'm honest, I was a little bit worried that it might not work with Ableton Live 12 anymore. I thought it'd be like an old iPhone that doesn't support the latest update and just would be a useless waste of money. But thankfully, no, like I said, it is working with Ableton Live 12, connecting and doing all the things you would expect a Push controller to do. And that's the main worry out the way. Let's look at the integration between Live and the Push 1, and let's start with the screen. Now, visual feedback is a huge part of the Push controller. It means you don't have to stare at the computer screen anymore, and you can control Ableton Live remotely. But here's the thing, this is where the Push 1 is going to start to feel a little bit dated. Look at this screen. It's like an old Nokia 3210. It's got a monochrome LED display, which was not bad for its time, but yeah, it's looking a little bit old today. If you haven't already seen the screens on the Push 2 and 3, you'll see they both have a full color high-res screen, which makes it easier to edit MIDI notes, dive into Ableton Live's details, and just navigate around Ableton Live a lot more easily on the Push. With that said, although it may not look flashy and it looks a bit dated, it gets the job done. The screen still works with all the encoders. It shows you names, parameter values, and you can still tweak everything inside Ableton Live without looking at a computer screen. We have these 6 buttons up here which change the function of the display of the screen. We have a volume, which in conjunction with the faders adjusts the track volume, and we can see what it does and how much it's doing it by. We also have pans. If we press it again, we get all the sends, and you can just toggle through all the various sends you have set up in Ableton Live. We have track, which is a mode that's no longer featured on the Push 2 and 3, but I think it's really cool. It essentially gives you the volume, pan, and all the sends information for whatever track you have selected, and you can select it using the track select buttons here. That means you don't have to be jumping around the volume and pan button up here. And that's a really cool workflow, that button. Then we have clip. This is where you're going to notice the most limitations in comparison to the Push 2 and 3. Now, when we click on clip, you'll see here, we don't really have much options. We've got a start, end, loop, and that's about it. Now, this is where the monochrome LED display limits us a little bit. We can't get in and edit any MIDI notes or anything like that. And with the later models, the Push 2 and 3, because of the high res full color display, we can get in, we can edit MIDI notes, we can add in MIDI notes, we can move them around, we can do all various sorts of MIDI editing things we could do in Live, but directly on the Push controller. So this is where you're going to notice some limitations and you're going to have to jump back into Live. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it's just worth noting. Then we have our device mode here, which works slightly different from the later models. If I'm in session mode and I click here, I can't toggle between the devices. What we have to do is we have to go into note mode, and then we have to use the arrows here to scan through all the different devices to control on the screen, which is, yeah, a little bit clunky. They've definitely improved that. Now on the newer pushes, you just have track buttons up here and you have track buttons up here where you can just select through all the devices. You don't need to do this thing here, which is a bit clunky. So here we have the browser. This is where we can scan through all our favorite instruments and audio effects and load them directly onto a new track. You can simply go up and down by using these coders here, or you have an up and down button here. And that's it. Okay. Another thing you can do with display is you can manage the key and scale settings of the instruments in note mode, which brings me on to my next section, which is the pads. Now, this is one thing that has not changed at all, which is the layout of the pads. The functionality remains the same between the push 1, 2, and 3. I think they just got it right. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The push 1 has this amazing 8x8 grid of 64 pads that can control Ableton Live session view, but also can control melodic instruments and drums. We do this by simply jumping through these two buttons here, which we got note mode, which will help us control an instrument. If we press session mode, that will show us the clips in Ableton Live session view. Now you launch clips by just pressing play on the clips here, and we can launch scenes with these buttons down here that have illuminated green, just like that. Now this functionality remains exactly the same today. So this is not outdated one bit whatsoever. Now we can control the instruments as well by pressing note mode, and then we can scroll through the different instruments using the navigational arrows down here. So at the moment I'm on a melodic instrument, and we get this view here, which is what you call in key mode. Now we can press this button here, scales, which brings up the screen, and then we can edit how we see these notes, also what key they're in and what scale they are. So at the moment it's in minor, we put it to F. As standard, it comes in C major, but I've changed it. We can also change if it's in fixed or not, and we can also take it out of key into chromatic mode. These features again remain exactly the same on the push 2 and 3. The push 1 kind of set the standard with this, and it was so good they haven't changed it. So this is amazing that this still holds up in 2025. Now in note mode, we have a few different ways to control the notes. If I press note mode again, it turns into a step sequencer. Press it again, we have a melodic step sequencer, which means I can sequence chords and melodies. I have like half of it is a note mode, half of it is step sequencer, and that's it, which again is exactly the same on all the pushes. Now, if I go through and I select a drum, now drum rack works exactly the same as well. We have a quarter of the pads down here, which control the drums. Then we select a drum and we have the top half here, which controls just like a step sequencer. Now we have another little kind of quarter down here that we can flip between the views. We start off, we get loop mode, which basically helps us choose which loops we want to use and the duration of the clip. Press it again, we have different velocity values that I can select and use in the step sequencer. Press it again, I have all 64 pads ready to be loaded with drum samples to play. Again, this functionality is exactly the same on all the pushes. So it's blowing my mind that the main core features of the push 1 still hold up today in 2025 against the more modern controllers like the push 2 and 3 and all the other ones out there. It's functionality of having a session mode and you control the clips and the scenes is the same. Flip it over to note mode, you have a melodic keyboard, and then if you have a drum rack, you have exactly the same layout as you do today. This is amazing. This could mean that the push 1 is the ultimate budget-friendly controller, or is it? Now, let's look at the next bit, which is where we look at the navigational buttons. Now, this is where there's been a lot of development amongst the different pushes, and we might find some drawbacks here. So let's jump in and have a look. Now, the layout of the navigation buttons for Live has changed, like I said, on the push 2 and 3. Most notably on the push 3, you have a big rotary controller so you can scroll through your devices and presets really quickly and navigate around Live like effortlessly, which is a big improvement over this. This is a bit clunky when it comes to filling these encoders, but hey, it's not the end of the world. Also, a lot of the main functions and features that you control in Ableton Live are still very accessible via the buttons down the left and the right hand side. The ones that are kind of most common are the play and session record buttons, which again have remained the same. The thing that you're going to notice on the Push 3 is you have a MIDI capture button. The reason why it's not here is because it wasn't invented or wasn't in Ableton Live when this was made. So that's where you just press a button and it captures what you recorded even though you didn't press record, which is an amazing feature. And I've done a little video on it here if you want to see that. But the other thing that remains the same is you have this amazing button, which is the fixed length button here. Now, it's a feature that isn't in Ableton Live, and it enables you to record a clip, then after a certain amount of time, automatically play back the clip. Now, if you hold it down, you can select the duration. If I put 1 bar here, then if I turn it on, it basically means I can record clip for 1 bar using the session record, and it will automatically play back and go into MIDI overdub, which is great for looping. It means you don't have to jump over session view, press record, play your note, and jump back here and end it. You can use fixed length, and that is directly here. You have access to automation, quantize, which if you're like me, timing is not great, quantize it straight away. We also have double, which is great for doubling things straight away, and delete. And the most used button of all time on the Push for me is undo, and that's there. We do only have one set of navigational arrows here, which on the subsequent pushes, you have at least 2. And like I said, on Push 3, you have a navigational dial. So it is a little bit limiting, but it's in the right place. It's right down here. Sometimes you have things up here and you have to reach all over the place. But yeah, we've got that there. We still have note and session mode, which flips between the 2 views. And we got add effect, add clip. We have our metronome speed here and swing amount, which is great. And we can turn the metronome off here, and we have a tap tempo. Like I said before, we have our different display selector buttons here. And then we have mutes and solos. Pretty much everything you need. The only thing that's really been improved here is the overall workflow layout, making it more efficient and quicker for you to navigate around Ableton Live directly on the Push controller. But with that said, it's not the end of the world, and you quite quickly get used to it. I keep saying it, but honestly, it's wild. After 10 plus years, the majority of the features on the Push 1 remain unchanged. So far, so good, right? What's the catch? Well, there is a catch, and there's one big catch. One of the most common complaints about the Push 1, especially if you're buying it secondhand in 2025, is its surface material, the outer casing. Over time, it can rubberize and degrade and become tacky and very sticky, which, let's be honest, that's far from ideal. No one likes to hold on to a MIDI controller and it get all sticky. Also, it means all the dust in your studio can stick to it, and your Push starts to get a little bit furry, which is not ideal, right? Now, the coating breaks down and gets sticky over time due to factors like heat, humidity, and just natural aging. Now, it doesn't affect the functionality of the controller, but it makes it less pleasant to use. I mean, like I said, no one likes to hold a sticky Push, so it's something to consider. Now, you see here, my one here came secondhand, and the previous owner had fixed this issue by unscrewing the coating, taking it off, and using chemicals to remove the sticky substance around the outside. So now I have a smoothed, polished look to my Push 1, and there is no sticky feeling to it whatsoever. So it's something to be aware of. It's not the end of the world, but it can be a little bit unpleasant if you do not fix stickiness. Now, with that said, that does affect the price in a good way. So let's look at the next section of the video, which is the price. Now, this plays an important part of why this controller would still be relevant today. Like I said, the Push 3's price tag, brand new, is eye-watering. Let's put it that way. If you're looking for a new Push 3, it's over £800 for the tethered version. If you want the standalone version, you're looking at around about 1,700-ish. I think it's a little bit cheaper than that. I think it's 1,650. I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's a lot of money. And like I say in the intro, when I get students to play with the Push, they're like, this is awesome. How much? And I tell them, they're like, nah, I'm out. See you later. So the Push, when it was first launched, came in at around $599 US. And that did include a free copy of Ableton Live Intro, as does the newer Push controllers. So now fast forward to 2025, and this can go for as low as £50 on the secondhand market. I got my one for £90, but on average, what I've seen on Gumroad, Reverb, and eBay is the prices range from around £100 to £200. Now, this is depending on its condition and what's included. Now, let's compare that price to a secondhand Push 2 controller. Now, a typical price for a Push 2 is around about £200 to £300 on the secondhand market, which is also a good deal, but only real difference between those two is going to be the screen. The functionality is going to remain the same. So it's worth keeping your eye on eBay, Reverb, and Gumroad, just checking the prices, because like I say, it is a secondhand market, so it does fluctuate. I got really lucky. I got mine for £90, but I did see one go for £50 on Gumtree at one point, which is just an incredible price. So that brings me on to the main point of this video. Is the Push 1 still relevant in 2025? Honestly, it comes down to what you're looking for. If you're looking for a solid, budget-friendly controller for Ableton Live, Push 1 is still a solid option. Many of the core features still remain unchanged to this day. And with the prices on the secondhand market often being between £100 and £200, and mine was even less, it was £90, it's an amazing bargain. It's incredible value for what you get. But just be aware of that sticky outer coating. The main standout limitation of the Push 1 is the screen. Its LED monochrome display makes this controller feel a little bit dated. It just means you can't do finer editing and adjusting in Ableton Live on the Push. You'll still have to jump over to the computer. That said, although it's not fully HD, full color, it still works. You can still control a lot of things and get a lot of visual feedback from different things in Ableton Live. So that's it. If you can get your hands on a Push 1, grab one. The other thing that the Push 1 doesn't do that newer Push controllers can do is it's not standalone, obviously. That's the most recent development of the Push 3. If you're curious on how the Push 1 stacks up against the Push 2 and 3, I've done a video here where I do a side-by-side comparison of all three controllers. Be sure to check that out. Thank you for watching. Hopefully see you in the next one. Bye for now.